Hello, beautiful light-filled souls. I am so happy to be here today with a new guest, Michaela Light, and I'm fascinated by this book, Intuitive Leadership Mastery: How a Conscious CEO Doubled Profits and Half Stress. You said that you wrote this about 8 years ago. This is a personal desire of mine is to help people experience life with less stress and more abundance, more joy, more love, more happiness. I can't wait to hear from you about this. But how did writing this book change your direction?
Well, I started off, I did a math degree when I was very much younger, and I was very logical and didn't believe in religion and God and all that. And as I got older, I started getting more into personal growth. I actually had a little mini car accident. I didn't go all the way and leave my body like you did, but I had some injuries. I got some physio, I did some yoga, and through that meditation, and I started getting really into personal growth. And that led me to use my intuition in my business way more. And that's where the genesis of this book came. And I had an intuition I should write this book to share with other people what I've been doing myself, and also, if you've written a book too, for me, from writing the book, I kind of understood new things that I sort of knew, but I hadn't crystallized them as well. So
We were talking a little bit before the show, and I encounter people sometimes who have blocks to finding their purpose or to bringing in money or to really using intuition to manifest more of what they want. So,
oh
what what do you say to people who are blocked in a certain way? Like they just aren't moving forward at this time. They're really finding challenges to moving forward with a dream.
well, I think the first thing I would say is self-kindness and self-acceptance would be where I'd start. It's hard to shift blocks without first accepting this is where I am. I did the best I could in the young years of my life, which, however I got here, whatever traumas I had or past lives or whatever it is that caused you to have these blocks. And then I would do magic work on the blocks, or work with someone like Tricia, who does amazing healings, who can see the energy that's blocking you. I mean, my personal view is that humans are these wonderful spiritual creatures filled with light, and they just want to shine their light in different ways, whatever your quote purpose is. We can talk about purpose later, but if your purpose is to cut people's hair, it's to make it an amazing experience and do these amazing haircuts and make people feel better about life, while you probably act as a little therapist with them while you're doing it. That's just an example. Every job, every career, every role in life, if you're a stay-at-home parent, or whatever your role is, grandmother, grandfather, has a purpose, I believe. And so we all come into this world filled with light. If you ever look at young babies, less than 3 years old, young toddlers, usually, unless they've had some unfortunate traumatic incident, they are just shining with joy, full of energy, bounding around. Possibly for the adults around, maybe a bit too much energy, but they're full of life. And then what happens? Why is it that the adults, something happens? And my belief is that they get filled with negative beliefs and programming from their parents, from other people around them, from schools, from their first job, from the government, from the TV, from movies, all the media. And it's like you've got this shining light and it's covered up with ucky stuff that stop the light shining in certain directions. So, for example, if someone was an entrepreneur like I am, and often people have difficulty hiring and they hire someone who doesn't work out, and then they have what I would call a hiring scar in that part of their energy field. They're kind of reluctant to do that task, or they have this belief that I can't hire good people, or whatever the thing is. Maybe it's around relationships. Maybe you had a bad breakup or you had abuse, and now you're like, oh, I don't think I can ever be with someone who loves me and I love them. Whatever the area of life is. And I imagine it's like we've got these areas of life around us in a circle, And some of them are filled with dirt and mud, and we can't manifest easily in there. That's what I'd call a block. And perhaps, probably, I think nearly every human has one area of their life where they can do great stuff and they're not blocked. Maybe it's, exercising and being healthy. Maybe it's relationship with their parents. Maybe it's earning money. Maybe it's bringing up children, whatever it is. We all have different skills and abilities. And that's an area of our life where the light is shining. And if you can imagine, if that area is bright and shiny, some other area, you could clean up the windows in that area of your life, either by help from an energy healer or through prayer or through self-healing. There are many modalities, but I think all the healing modalities really come down to adding more love and light into that area, and it just makes the dirt go away. So
I couldn't agree more. When I came out of the near-death experience, I visited a hospital a year later. A friend had had a back accident and I got lost, and I walked through the nursery area of that hospital, and there were these huge pictures of babies, and I just stopped and started laughing because I was looking in their eyes. I was like, oh, this baby's about a year. I'm about a year. I just came from that light, and I could see it in their eyes, just that pure light in that place. And it's true, we probably as infants overwhelm our parents with our light, and that happened in a past life regression. I saw myself coming into a family where it was just too much for that family. So I think, at times, a lot of our wounds are because people around us couldn't actually handle our lights. It's not because anything was wrong with us. We diminish our lights in order to fit in at times. And that, I'm sure in the business world that happens, and what has been the challenge about using intuition in the business world?
Well, when I started using it, it really, this was before I wrote the book, I think, maybe a year or two before I used it. I kind of made this conscious decision that I'm going to use it and be public about it. And I don't care what others think, but I still was afraid. I kind of was afraid and did it anyway. And what I discovered, I'm in an entrepreneur group for online location independent entrepreneurs. And among that group, about a third were like, wow, yeah, other people are like that too. I'm so glad you admit that you do this and let's chat. A third were like open to the idea. This could be helpful. I could see how that could be helpful. I don't know how to do it myself. I'm curious. And about a third, well, this is a bunch of BS, woo-woo, whatever. And we're not even going there. So, but interestingly, among the third who were like, we don't believe in this, some of them would come back 6 months later and are like, Michaela, I still think you're woo-woo batshit crazy, but you were actually right about that thing you talked about. So I think great. Slowly they come around. And I have a question I use in that group is, what would it take, or WWIT? And I use that a lot, and that's got very, a lot of people just use it and there, and that's accessing it. That's an easy way for people to access their intuition. So I've got a problem. I think I'm answering the question you haven't asked yet.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great question. The what would it take question, and how is that different from the how question? How are we going to do this? How are we going to get here?
Yeah, so in our lives, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur or a mom or whatever, and we have a problem, okay, maybe you need more sales this month, maybe you want to get a raise, maybe you want your kid to behave better, whatever it is. And often we ask, how can I get more sales? How can I get that raise? How can my child behave better? And the problem with how, there's nothing, I'm not saying how's totally terrible, but how focuses your brain to search for the exact method or way to do that. And it closes you off to all the other ways you could solve that problem. Maybe a friend could help. Maybe you could hire someone to help you. Maybe angels will help you do it. Maybe you'll go for a walk in the woods and get a sudden inspiration that, helps you move forward. And the other problem with how is kind of expecting, not only do you get the first baby step towards solving it, but you get every single other step. It's like, how do I climb Mount Everest? Well, you've got to take, 30,000 steps and they have to be perfect in this way. And it's like, you're never going to get that plan. But what you can get is, you see, there's the summit of the mountain. I'm going in the right direction. I'm taking one step in the right direction. Oh, I see a Sherpa there. Hi, Mr. Sherpa, would you like me to pay you some money so you can help me up the mountain? There's, what would it take opens up your intuition. I sort of think of it as like, when you type into Google or one of those other search engines and it goes away and searches, the same with questions. All questions do this, but what would it take is particularly good at this, for it opens up your intuition or your subconscious to start thinking of answers. And the other thing I want to say about it is how sort of implies you personally have to do all the work. This is not true. You can solve problems without doing any work. So, because it might resolve itself. It might be that you hire someone who deals with it. It might be the other person shifts. There's so many possibilities here.
Yes.
With health issues, as from, I love your book, by the way. And from your story, doctors kept telling you, oh no, you'll never walk again, or you'll never be able to do this. And it's like, you had a spontaneous healing, through the help of angels.
Yes.
And if you, sorry, go ahead. Time for you to talk.
No. I just, I love what you're saying. I just want to encourage it, like the people who contact me, and I wonder if you have people in your group who, struggle with the 1/3 who are interested and they want to use intuition, but they don't know if it's fear that they're hearing or if it's just basic creativity. I generally say, hey, there's nothing wrong with creativity. Creativity can very well be intuition. It's just coming in a form that we recognize in this way that doesn't scare us. So I love it that you get people to the creative part of their brain, because that's where the ideas can float in, and that's where intuition can come in.
Well, I think for people listening who feel they're blocked and they can't get intuition or whatever, or they aren't unable to talk to their angels, what I would say is, firstly, schools and society program us not to be able to do this. Often young children have imaginary friends, for example, and that's accepted for young children. But by the time they get to school, oh no, you shouldn't talk about that. That's shameful. That's bad. And in some circles, it's actually labeled as evil. There's some Christian churches that if you have intuitive messages, oh, that must be the devil talking. Well, what a way to shut down your intuition. So there are many reasons why intuition, and then also in university or in jobs, people expect you to answer the how question. Like, okay, you've suddenly got this intuition, we're going to make more sales by doing this. Well, how do you know that? Oh, it was my gut talking. Well, that's generally in business not seen as a good thing. Like, oh, I did research and I talked to this professor and blah, blah, blah. And I spent hours and hours struggling to come up with a plan. That's an acceptable answer. But that I got a sudden inspiration from God, that's generally not kind of the way to go in a Fortune 500 business meeting. So personally, I think it would be totally acceptable.
But I love it that about 1/3 are doing that anyway, and maybe either don't talk about it openly, or just just use it. Just know that it's a part of who they are. Now, in this world, the last couple of years, especially this last year, why is intuition important now, right now?
Well, the world has got a little loopy doopy, crazy, chaotic, we've had, what is it? COVID, we had a war in Ukraine, we've got monkeypox, we've got inflation, we've got a recession, we had the Disney versus Florida crisis, we had, I can't even remember all the narrative, the Black Lives Matters, all kinds of, I think people are overwhelmed. There's so many narrative shifts, like this is the thing you're supposed to be upset about. And it used to be there was maybe one of those a year, perhaps. And now it seems there's one every other week. and it's just too much. And in addition, things are not working as well either in the 3D plane. You know, sometimes the electricity's out, or the price of your gas bill has gone up, or you can't find your favorite food, or I was trying to buy some leggings the other day, and the Amazon was sold out. There was a supply chain, whatever you call it, crisis, delay,
Wow.
blip, whatever you call that thing. And then in addition, it seems a lot of people are really kind of angry. There's a lot of road rage. I was talking to a friend from the States who's here in Peru, and she said she was just in a parking lot and she saw this grandma slowly backing out of the supermarket parking space, and it wasn't quick enough for the other person who wanted to use the space, and he started yelling at this grandma, and it's like, could you be a little kind? What? But I understand why he's not. I wasn't really upset at the grandma. He's having a very frustrating time in his life. So why is intuition important? It helps to navigate this. One way to visualize this: imagine you're in the ocean, the beach, and there are these big waves rolling in. And if you've got your intuition, you're aware of when the next wave is, and you can bob up and down. If you're kind of not looking in the direction of the wave to see your intuition, the wave will splosh over you and knock you over, and then you'll be gulping seawater. Which way do you want to live?
Right. In the flow of joy, and in the flow of where you need to be. And I often think about this. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we were in lockdown here in Texas, there was someone who had to buy bulk food, and he was in front of me in line, and he wanted a smaller amount than they put it in bulk. And at first I was kind of frustrated when I was standing behind him. And then I looked at his food, and he had beans and pizza, and then he only had a few dollars in his hand. And I was like, oh, he doesn't have enough money for beans and pizza. And he's
Oh,
upset that he can't get someone to half this amount of beans.
mm-hmm.
And so I just paid for his food. And in that moment, I knew I'd done something right, because
Oh,
I picked up on
yeah.
this desperation that he, might have to
Yes.
steal, he might have to do something, like he was just in a place. And I'm like, kindness can prevent so much negativity down the line. That's what we forget. When you choose to be kind, even just a smile to someone,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we often see in our life review, is that we added light, we added joy, we added peace, to disharmony in places. So totally agree. Like, we are navigating things. When it comes to business, it seems like things change so quickly. Did you get an intuition that, oh, this change is coming up, I better shift gears in this way?
I didn't get a direct message, and let me just say that different people hear hear their intuition different ways. So if you're not hearing angel voices in your head, that doesn't mean you're not hearing your intuition. You might see visuals. You might have an amazing dream that gives you insight. You might bump into the right person at the right time. You might be, if you're into reading the Bible, you might open the Bible at a random page and see, oh, that passage applies to my situation, or whatever book you use to do that. Or you might draw tarot cards, or whatever. Or you might pay attention to animals. I mean, there's a whole study of, like, you see an animal and you interpret that to give you information.
One thing that I'm curious about, I know that many people feel guilty around using intuition and making money, or really just even the topic of money. And it's a deep,
Oh,
like, seated fear in people. And I see this,
oh,
at this conditioning level, especially in the States. We get very much attacked, by writing a book to make money, or doing anything in the spiritual realm to make money. And maybe that's because we've seen people abuse it, different evangelical ministers who have abused this, or we see various ministers who
mm,
accumulate too much wealth. But most of the time, people strike me as sincere, and as just wanting to share their light and shine their light the way you're talking about. What do you say to people, or what do you help them with when they really encounter that kind of deep-seated block around using intuition and making money?
well, money is just energy. And it's just, when we were talking about that, different directions we could shine our light in. Money is just one direction, just like health or family or whatever area of our life. And so let me answer that question in one way, which is change the conversation to health. Would you be feeling guilty if you were working out or eating healthy or, whatever you're doing, getting extra sleep to be even more healthy, and you're guilty that you've accumulated too much health and maybe you should be a bit sicker to help out the unhealthy people in Ethiopia or something, and what about that minister who's super healthy? I mean, that's so bad, So it's ridiculous, isn't it? You'd never think that, but we do that with money, and wealth and health are just two aspects of shining a light. And coming back to that phrase you used, the minister who was, quotes, too wealthy. What the heck does that mean? How can you be too wealthy? How can you be too healthy? How can you be too happy? How can you be too spiritual? How can you be too loving?
Right. It's not the money that's the problem. I think, in my town, or not my town, but in my state, a lot of people criticize Joel Osteen, who, has multi-million dollar home and
Good
church.
I would say good for him for having that money.
Yes.
Maybe the way he earned it is not ideal. Perhaps that's what they're really saying.
Exactly. I think
there's nothing wrong in having millions or billions or trillions of dollars. Yeah, it's just the energy.
Exactly. And I think he's criticized by not helping people during times of disaster or not being charitable enough. And looking at the world from a charitable.
It's his money. Most people have lots of blocks around money, just like they have blocks around intuition. To be honest, society and school teaches us to be guilty about making money. They teach us you got to work hard for the money. Money doesn't grow on trees. There's all kinds of wacky beliefs around money. And it keeps people small, And I won't delve down into the tangent as to why a society might be created that way. But if you want to change your own money situation, you need to do some cleanup in your own money beliefs that your parents may have passed on to you. You may have learned at school. I mean, school typically doesn't even have classes about money and how to pay your bills in a good way and how to earn money and invest and what have you.
I know a friend of
Why
mine.
not? It's a very basic skill.
A friend of mine in college took that exact class because she had a single mom who actually handed her the checkbook and said, look, I don't have the money for you to go on this trip, but if you can find a way with all of my money, you pay all the bills. If you find a way, I'll send you on this trip. And she saw that her mom didn't have the money. So as soon as she got to college, she was like, okay, I've got to save while I'm young. And she figured out this formula that actually really helped her. And I look back and I was like, of all my friends, we all should have been required to take that course. Like it helped guide her in this way that was just, there was nothing wrong with saving money in her 20s. She had a health scare in her 30s, traveled around the world, hiked Mount Kilimanjaro, did a lot of cool things because she had a savings.
Ooh. So yeah, what an empowering move from her mother. I mean, I don't know if she thought it through or she just was desperate to kind of head off an argument with her daughter. But either way, that so empowered her daughter. And here's another thing: a lot of Americans, this isn't true of all societies, it's taboo to talk about money. Yeah. How much do people earn? In other countries, that's a very common open question. But in America, no, you mustn't talk about that, So there's a lot of baggage around money. And it is only energy. And coming back to your question, like I think you asked, is it bad to use your intuition to attract money or to make more sense? Of course, it's not bad. I mean, God is in everything. Yeah, it's in every person, everything, every mountain, every tree, every bird, every animal, and every dollar bill. Yeah, and every little zero in your bank account. All of that is God. How can God be bad? How can you feel guilty for helping multiply? Go out and multiply was one of the things. I know it was applied to having kids, but it also applies to creating wonderful things. Be creative. And if you create and you provide value to other humans, what we do in our current society is they usually give you money for doing it. And the better job you do of solving other people's problems and giving them value and providing wonderful customer service or whatever it is you do, the more money you can get. And to take it a step further, the more you can organize your business and hire fabulous employees and figure out creatively how to attract your ideal customers, again, the more money, to an even other level. And there's no limit.
So I have a question since you brought up God. What is God in your view?
I think God, as I said, is in everything, and everyone is part of God. It's like a holographic thing. In other words, there's a whole, which is God total. But if you break a hologram into pieces, each piece contains a perfect image of God, and each human contains a perfect image of God. We're made in God's image, to use a more Christian metaphor. And so, but when you put it together into everything in the whole of creation, it's a much more powerful consciousness than our individual consciousness typically are. And we all can connect with that supra intelligence, to use a different phrase from someone who I'm forgetting the name of. But supra intelligence is like, or super consciousness is like regular consciousness and subconsciousness. So you've got those three, and super consciousness is the whole God force or creation. And as far as I can tell, it likes to have different experiences through all the different pieces of it. You, me, everyone listening, all the animals and birds, the mountains, they all have different experiences. And it seems to like people in, having joy, and in doing stuff joyfully. But it's also open to experiencing other experiences, darker, traumatic, or whatever. It's very accepting.
Well, I'll ask another question connected to near-death experiencers. A lot of us have trouble describing our experiences, and I'm sure you've seen some of the James Webb Telescope images coming out, and I have trouble until I saw one of those images and I was like, oh, that's where I had my life review, was in a starscape like this. And I saw a hologram of pieces of my life, but it was like a dreamscape that just kind of went into the stars and went away. And God seemed to be this greater intelligence, or the minute I was outside of my body, I was connected to an intelligence that was so much more than me that I could not feel bad about having to leave me. Like I was just this physical body, was just this individual container. And suddenly I was connected to this greater intelligence that, yes, was empathetic, was accepting, and only wanted me to have more love and more joy and more love for others. Like there did seem to be this direction to not judge, like,
Yeah.
to not judge people, and to really be in this state of joy, like a child. I mean, it's interesting that you're bringing up that child metaphor, because that was part of what I heard from God, was be like a little child.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to me, God is much bigger than one human, and a little child can be very godlike. They're just full of gurgling light and curiosity and joy, and they want to help others and have a good time. And what I'm going to say is, if you imagine little children are filled with light or God or however you want to say it, and then as we get older, we get covered up with trauma and other beliefs that cover up that light. I just want to add in, as people get older, as they get nearer to when they think they might die, often that darkness falls away. And often older people are also full of joy and kind. Not every older person. I know some older people who aren't that way, but a lot of them become more childlike and laugh more and help people out and do things for the joy of it. It's almost like the two ends of the human life experience. They're almost mirrors of each other. I'll add in one other thing. Little children don't really have gender. I mean, obviously they're boys or girls, but they don't really have a strong gender expression. When people go through adolescence and adulthood, there's kind of a more of a separation into male and female. But as people age, women start getting hairs on their face and they become more assertive typically, and men often become gentler. They sometimes their breasts get a bit bigger too. there's kind of a merging back to the infinite that occurs. So it's
Yeah,
very interesting.
my grandmother is in a unit for memory care, and when I saw her last, she was like a
Ooh.
little child, and I was so happy because I got to ask her some questions that, like my religious family probably wouldn't appreciate it, but I was like, "Hey," she was real playful, and she's like, "The things we talk about, they don't even matter." And I was like, "I know." And so we connected, and I said, "Hey, do you think that you're going to come back? Do you think that when you leave your body, you're going to come back and get another one?" And she was like, "Probably." And I was like, "Oh, she would never have said that," like the less playful version of herself before dementia, because of fear of judgment. But she's in this playful state where we can talk about death, we could talk about the afterlife, we could talk about these things like
Oh,
children with this joy. And so it was really beautiful
yes.
to see.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, my mother had dementia before she died, and it's like she did a lot of napping in the afternoon, and I think she was in another dimension. She couldn't really understand the third dimension so well. And an example of that, in the TV guide, they give the time of the show, and she had some favorite shows she liked to watch. But what she would do is she'd take the remote control, and instead of putting in channel 9 at 10 a.m., she put in 1000 for 10 a.m., thinking that would make the time change. In her reality, you could shift time backwards, forwards, sideways, anything you liked. And then she'd get frustrated that her show wouldn't come on.
That's great, though.
So
She was time traveling.
yeah, so I think a lot of people who have dementia or various mental illnesses like schizophrenia, for example, my mother had a bit of that when she was younger. And I actually think my mother was actually very intuitive and spiritual, but she, because of the constraints of 1950s and 60s society, she just didn't know how to handle it. And so when, the definition, I don't know the exact definition of schizophrenia, but one of the things that happens is people hear voices. Oh my goodness, isn't that what people who are intuitive or connected with angels or God do? Maybe some of those schizophrenics are actually like hyper tuned in to other dimensions,
I
and the
believe
same
that.
with young kids who hear voices. Maybe they also are tuned into angels, or fairies or whatever. So I think we're coming to a shift now in our reality where people open up to this. And that's why I wrote that book. That's why I run my podcast. It's to open people up to this because it'll make your life easier. You can be more abundant, more healthy, and just not have to struggle so much anymore.
I had this intuition after my near-death experience. I started encountering entities at times, and some of the
Woo!
experiences were really intense, where machinery was being messed with, where like we were all conscious that something was happening in the room, messing with all of our phones, our laptops. And so I just did this clearing because I knew there was an entity there, sent it this portal that I went into that I just knew from my near-death experience, and the entity left and was very happy to go to that light. And I didn't question it, I just did it with authority, and did it in that moment.
Yes.
But later, I've begun to have questions about removing entities. And so I'd love to hear some of your stories
Oh,
about removing entities from ghosts and people.
absolutely. So there are entities all around us. Ghosts are all around us. There tend to be more ghosts. So just to clarify, I'm calling a ghost a human spirit that's died but didn't make it to the light for whatever reason. For example, if they died in a car accident and they weren't expecting to die, or they were in a terrible battle in a war like the Civil War, and they weren't planning on dying, and they don't really accept that they've died, or they've got strong feelings of vengeance against someone, they don't want to leave the planet, or they have strong cords with family members, and they have difficulty leaving. So, and then entities are not a non-human spiritual entities. I can't think of another word for it. Beings. Typically, not always, but typically they're weaker than humans, and certainly weaker than any living human. Living humans are so full of light. We are so much more powerful than any of these ghosts and entities. So anyone listening who's like afraid of ghosts or a bit nervous, if you connect to God, you connect to Mother Earth below you, and you shine your light, and like you say, you command them to go to the light, or you ask your angels to help with that, they're effing going. there ain't a question here. You might have to do a little more tweaking if they're more attached or more powerful, but there's nothing to be afraid of. And it's a service. The truth is, every being wants to go back to God, back to the light. And now they may be a little afraid, okay, because they've been there maybe for years or hundreds of years or thousands of years. And they're a little nervous of going to light. Oh, is it going to be nice there? You know, will they have ice cream? You know, I'm not sure I want to go, but just encourage them lovingly and then firmly send them to the light. So I've done this for hundreds of thousands of entities. It's, you know, I learned it from a woman called Christy Marie Sheldon, who does intuition training, which I took. And I was a bit nervous doing it at first, and I got better at it. And I've sometimes had problems because on this planet, there are some entities that are like teeny tiny, like mice, and it's like, shoot. And there are other entities that are like 50 feet tall demons, you know, that are doing naughty things. And they may need a little bit more oomph to get them to go. And they may be more attached. They may be a bit more powerful magically. So either you increase your own powers and skills to do that, or you get help from other light workers to send them to the light.
And I'm fascinated by people who buy places that are haunted. And I have a client who bought a very haunted house, and she said she had to get 3 different workers to work with her on that house and
yes.
and kind of change that energy around it, because sometimes you don't have enough powers yourself. I used to go in with a friend, Clyde, and he would bring different people, and we would go into people's houses and do this. But he knew, he was like, hey, you might be the one that's talking to it, but let's have as many people as we can here that are centering the light and really, you know, clear this for people. So it is cool. Why do you think, now, this is something that I've wondered about. Like, I don't know if you know about Zach Baggins, the Haunted Museum in New Orleans. I saw in Vegas, but I saw a quick clip about that, and I thought, I don't want to go in there. The energy of certain objects seems very heavy, very dense.
Yep.
And it's not that I would be afraid or attacked, it's just that energy is very low, and I could sense it even from the TV show. Like, it's like, you know, there's high levels of energy, and then there's this lower levels. So maybe what you're talking about some of these tougher entities, it's just the frequency is almost like when you hear a low hum, or you just kind of walk in somewhere, you know, the beat, your heart changes. I think I can just kind of feel it intuitively. Why do we not clear all these things? You know, like, why doesn't he say, hey, I want some light workers to come in and clear all this negativity, or these famous haunted places? Why do you think, you know, we aren't clearing them?
Some people are afraid. Some people know you can clear a space of ghosts or low energy. And let me just say that it's not just ghosts or entities. There's also buildings do if a trauma happens in a building, like a murder or a rape or in a hotel room, sensitive people can feel something has happened there, or a battlefield, for example, I went to the killing fields in Cambodia. Oh my God, the energy is low there. And I spent 2 hours meditating, doing my own part to clean up that and help any spirits go to light as best I could. And then I was totally exhausted and had to have a nap. So you can clean. And I set that intention for all spaces I go to, wherever I travel. I do it for my own apartment whenever I'm traveling, that I set an automatic intention that space is automatically cleaned. Now, why do people not do this? Some people don't even know it exists. They just kind of don't feel so good there, but they don't realize it's low energy or entities. Other people with entities, if you take mind altering substances like alcohol or drugs, entities are or have sex, or I can't think of the other things, but the things we do that just open up our energy field, and it's easy for entities to pop in. And what I see, I used to drink a lot when I was younger, and what I see now is at bars, often it's like a entities, you know, swapping thing, you know, entities, this person has 3 entities, they're a bit bored with sucking the energy off that person, because entities often suck your energy. And so they like, oh, look, there's someone else drunk there, I'm going to pop over there, why don't we swap bodies, you know? So, and the same with random sex with people, right? That is also an opportunity, because when people have sex and have orgasms, their energy just feels wide open. It's an easy opportunity for stuff to come in if you're not conscious. So And then some people are afraid to deal with entities and ghosts or clearing space, or as we talked earlier, they're afraid to use their intuition or magical abilities. And there's nothing wrong with magical abilities. Jesus did magic healings all the time. He raised people from the dead. He turned water into wine. And I forget the exact quote. You probably can help me better on this, but I think he said, like, all of you can do these things. He said
Yes.
something to that effect.
Yes. And when
So,
you do it with an innocence, that's what I found. When I do it with confidence, innocence, and light, it does seem
yeah.
pretty easy to clear these entities. It doesn't seem difficult. It's only when I overthink it, instead of realizing, like, oh, I am connected to the most powerful source of light. God
Yes.
wants us to have beautiful experiences. Let's clear this space. And as you're talking about drugs and alcohol, I don't talk about this enough. I'm so glad you brought it up. But I lived in New Orleans, and this is after my
Woo.
near death experience, and I was afraid in many ways to delve into that party zone. That wasn't where I wanted to spend my time, but I would set out on Bourbon Street, and I met this artist, and we would watch the drunk people go by, and they'd get really drunk, like at different conventions. And we started to see spirits enter their body and change their faces. And so,
Yeah.
like, I saw a parrot, like this guy, he had a pirate behind him, and the pirate got inside of him, and he had this parrot, and I was like, oh my God, he just has been possessed by some ghost for a moment. And it really shocked me that it was that intense, that when you're deeply altered and not conscious, there's a lot more going on that we're not aware of.
Well, I would say possession is actually a lot more common than most Americans think. And I don't know what the percentage is, but I'd say easily more than half of Americans are currently possessed. Now, it doesn't mean they look like a pirate, but it does mean maybe they say mean words when they didn't mean to, or
Yeah.
they didn't mean to have that extra line of cocaine, but they just got crazy and out of control. When people say, I know it sounds like an excuse for someone to say, well, I wasn't myself when I did this bad thing, but it may actually be literally true. They may have, it may have been the entity who was being naughty. And I think of them less as evil and more like naughty children playing. I encourage people to remove entities from themselves every day. It's like taking a shower. Would you go through your life never taking a shower? Probably not. And I'd also say the thing to do every day is cut cords with everyone. Cords are negative connections of energy where someone's draining your energy. And there's a fabulous book called Healing Hands of Light. I think it's by Barbara Brennan. I don't know if you've seen it, but
No.
it has some amazing illustrations in it that show a man and woman together, and the man's kind of this abusive energy and she's this victim energy, and he's got this hook of cord into her third chakra and he's sucking her energy out, and she's giving her energy through her heart energy. It's like, wow. It just kind of very interesting what people get up to.
Yeah, I love using sea salt scrubs, and
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
visualizing, as I shower. And I got this from Nancy
Yes.
Rhines, who I
Ooh.
interviewed, like, if you shower in the morning and evening, why not just energetically cleanse yourself of everything? It's a
Yes.
perfect time.
Well, I'm going to say something that may be a bit extreme for some people listening, which is I end my hot shower with a cold shower, and it's a bit unpleasant, but I feel sparkling and full of energy. And it has other physical health benefits, but I think it does. I don't think entities or any little entities or things can deal with that, shock. And I've also done those, the ice bath thing that Wim Hof does. I don't know if you've
Oh
come
yeah.
across that, where you have a bath of ice cold water with ice cubes floating around in it. And then you get in the bath. And believe me, it is very, very cold. But after about 15 seconds, it doesn't feel cold. And what I've noticed when I watch other people do this, because I've led groups that have done this, is the entities just leave. And after we're done, there's always psychic debris in the room. And people feel wonderful afterwards. So I'm not saying you need to do that, but I'm just saying there are many ways. Saunas, I think, may do something similar. People generally feel wonderful after going to a sauna. And I think there's
Yeah.
something similar that goes on there.
Yeah, there's, yoga has certainly helped move energy through, me
Mm-hmm.
when I felt energy get stuck. I've Tai
Yes.
Chi and yoga, believe it or not, and I was resistant to Tai
Woo!
Chi, but it's great. It's wonderful.
Yes. Well, and I read the biography of who's that kung fu dude? Hong Kong American guy, died in the 60s or 70s.
Oh,
Did
Bruce Lee
Enter the
or
Dragon. Bruce Lee.
yes.
I read his biography, and he was an amazingly together guy and spiritual. I mean, this was in the 60s, so we have to give him a little bit of whatever, but he used that chi, when I'm not into fighting, but it is interesting intellectually for me to understand this. And when he punched or kicked, it was not just the physical arm moving, he's moving chi. If you watched him energetically, he is doing amazing things with his energy. And that's what a lot of his meditations and practice with Tai Chi or whatever the equivalent is that he did was about. It was about learning to use this energy for defense. And the philosophy of Kung Fu and most of those Eastern martial arts is it's only for defense. You're not to use it to hurt people who aren't attacking you or others that are, innocent. So it's very interesting. And the same is true for anything else in this 3D world. There's a 3D component, right? And then there's an energetic component. So if you want to manifest a goal, maybe you want to get a new job, maybe you want a new relationship, part of that's doing 3D stuff, but part of it's sending that energy out to manifest it happening. So it's easier. It kind of clears the route of debris. And maybe you take those inspired actions along the way, or maybe it comes to you serendipitously. I've had the experience this year. I needed someone to help me with a particular job in my business. I didn't advertise a job. I didn't really try hard. I just thought about it. And like 3 days later, an entrepreneurial friend of mine said, I'm laying off this wonderful person who does exactly what you need. They didn't know what I need, by the way, just so we're clear here. And I just leapt on it and interviewed him, and then, yep, you're hired. And that's how serendipitously the flow can happen in your life when you clear the blocks and you put out an intention and you're open to unexpected opportunities.
Yes, I've experienced so many moments like that I quit doubting. That the minute you're in joy, the minute you're in gratitude, the minute you just put it out there, like, hey, I need this. I would love to meet this type of person to help me with this project. They show up. They really do show up. You mentioned though animals earlier, so animals as a form of intuition, seeing them. I don't know why, and I've looked up the spiritual meaning of it, but I see hawks all the time. I mean, they come close to me, they circle around me. A hawk is one of my spiritual totems, without a doubt.
Yes.
And so part of that is seeing the big picture, and I think of my soul kind of floating away from my body during that near-death experience and getting a bigger picture of what's important when coming back here. And hawks do remind you of that because they can zero in on a target too and fly faster than than imaginable towards their target. But they also, they're predators. They kill, they kill to eat. And it's fascinating.
I'll let you into a secret, Tricia. Every living being kills to eat in one way or another. Whether you go to the supermarket to pick up potatoes that were either, well, I guess potatoes are still living in the supermarket, but they're going to get killed when you boil them or fry them pretty rapidly. Or even if you eat you wouldn't eat potatoes raw. Even if you eat lettuce raw, those lettuce cells are still living, and then they go in and get munched up, and then they go into that acid in your stomach, and guess what? They die. And even trees are living off decaying matter that went into the soil and was composted through fungi and bacteria. Life is a cycle. And, as long as you're not gratuitously killing for murder or just because you like killing, it's natural.
Are you seeing certain animals as totems? Are you attracted to that?
Well, I'm wearing these, I don't know if you can see them. For those watching on video, I've got this cute llama earring. So llamas are a symbol of strength and stubbornness as well. Or persistence would be a more positive way to label stubbornness. They're also great at spitting. Not that's something I wish to do. So with any totem animal, and also I've got a little tattoo of a spider on my arm that I got 20 plus years ago. Because spiders are sensitive to energy, like me as an intuitive spiritual person, very patient, waiting in their web. They're very creative. Making a web's pretty complicated if you're a little insect and the webs. I mean, if we were spiders, the web would be the size of an enormous office building. Can you imagine trying to create that? It's like, wow. And yeah. So, and then of course they have 8 legs, which corresponds to the number 8 if you turn on the side, symbol for infinity or God or light. So, you know,
And writing
so I'm
too.
certainly into and creative writing. Yes. So I do what I do, to be honest. I mean, I might intuitively connect with a spirit animal. But if I come across, a bird animal or a reptile or insect, I pay attention. Like a few years ago, I opened my door in the morning and there was a moth. It was like this big. It was like, gosh, 6, 7, 8 inches across. I'd never seen a moth that big, and it decided to die on my doorstep. And it was so beautiful. I forget the name of this breed of moth. And it's not usual in this part of the world because it's a bit chilly here at night. And moths and butterflies are typically a symbol of transformation. So that's how I took it. There's a great book I do want to mention called Animals Speak by Ted Andrews. And it lists a lot of animals. It has great descriptions of what the spiritual messages might be. It also has a whole bunch of Native American kind of wisdom around that. And not just the animals, but how many of the animal did you see? Did you see 1 hawk or 3? What direction were they flying in? There's all kinds of other little subtleties that can be picked up here. And I use that as a starting point. It's not a definitive. It's like, okay, a butterfly's transformation, but what message do I get from this particular butterfly right now? It's the same thing with body parts. Sometimes as humans we get sick or we injure something, and so I use a book, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, as a starting point for that. It has a table. It's a wonderful book talking about life and healing. But at the back, it has an enormous long table with all the parts of the body and all the diseases and symptoms. And it will give, okay, here's the physical thing, but what's the spiritual thing beneath this physical disease or accident or whatever? And then here's an affirmation you could play with to cure it. Because I believe all illness comes from the spirit, comes from spiritual thing, comes from beliefs, comes from emotions, comes from trauma that hasn't been healed. Maybe it's from past lives. Maybe, this, you work on this if you do health work, which I think you do, that really underlying these physical things is some kind of blockage of the flow of light and God and chi in the person. And it shows up as whatever it is, a headache or indigestion or, bad knees or cancer or whatever they brought up.
And it's so fascinating when it's a past life connection, because I've had friends who told me about some of their past life regressions and how it's cleared up an issue, but then they know, okay, it's like a war injury, and then when you see something from a war, that they'd experienced in a past life, the pain in the hip or the pain in the leg will come back.
Yep.
There's a story from Dr. Jane Holden, and she couldn't understand, why anytime she saw that on the television, it would make it worse, but it was connected.
Oh, it's definitely true. I've removed, fatal sword wounds from people, spear wounds. Yeah. It's amazing. And myself. And, it's amazing what we have in our energy systems. And, if anyone listening is interested in that, one of the ways to get in touch with that is to be more rested, to meditate, maybe fast. These are all ways to get more in touch with spiritual side and then be able to notice stuff. And then maybe work on it spiritually. And one other thing I want to add here, what I've noticed in the last year or two is that if I watch, videos or I read things that, maybe they're violent, maybe they're, dramatic, I will pick up that energy and it gets stuck in my body. So I kind of reduce my info diet. I'm careful what I take in, but I'm also careful to flush out or clean out any information I've taken, not individually pieces of information. I just clean out I do a body scan, look through all pieces of my body, and anything that feels icky, I'll do some healing and light work there. And that's definitely help me in this time of information overload. Because if we think of the food digestive system, no one listening would think of constantly eating junk food and bad food, but never going to the bathroom ever. Yeah. Because
Right.
like you'd bloat up and feel terrible. So we take with food, we eat food. Some of that food's nutritious, we absorb it into ourselves. Some of it is just filler, it's fiber or filler. It just needs to pass through. Some of it is actively toxic and needs to be either eliminated or processed by our liver or whatever body organs do that processing. The same with information. We take in a lot of information in modern society. Some of it is useful, can be assimilated into our consciousness. Some of it is irrelevant, just needs to be let go of. Some of it is actively damaging and needs to be healed and let go.
Yes, couldn't agree more with everything that you said. And especially about like meditation. I think for me, the hawk reminds me that, flying free, the out-of-body experience, flying free beyond this limitation is so much fun. Like it's great to have that wide perspective where you can fly, and as spirits we can fly, and just remembering that we are connected to flight is a beautiful thing that gives me personal joy. And I want to end with one question about joy, and that is, why is joy important for profits in business?
Great question. Yeah, so much in the past in the society, in previous decades, it was almost taboo to be having joy at work. If you were, your boss will come along and say, hey, you really doing the work here? And I think joy is our natural way of expressing light. And scientists have studied how much times people laugh. Young children, like less than 3 years old, they'll giggle and laugh 300 or 400 times every single day. Adults, maybe 2 or 3 times. Something wrong there. And so I think bringing more joy, more humor, obviously it needs to be appropriate humor, right? But you can smile, you can laugh, you can make a little joke, you can compliment someone, you can focus on, what would it take? We all do tasks that have different levels of joy, and you could classify the level of joy. You could look at all your things you're planning to do today, and you could score them on a score of 0 to 10, where 10 is, wow, this is exciting, and 0 is, oh my god, this is a drag and sucks. But then you can say, for this task that's maybe a 5, what would it take for it to be a 6 level of joy? Oh, well, if I put some great music on while I did it, that would help. Or what would it take to get from a 6 to a 7? And you can bump these things up to more joy. And I remember reading a Tony Robbins thing where he was ticked off that he had to do the dishes at some retreat, and he was put on kitchen patrol KP duty. But he made a way to make doing the dishes fun. And it's like he imagined he was cleaning off his chakras as he did each dish. I forget what he did, but he's a very creative man. And we can do that with everything. Add more joy, and it becomes infectious. Our clients want to have that meeting with us because they know they're going to have a good time. And the same with it attracts great staff, and they want to stay working with us. Or if we're an employee and we have a job, it makes our co-workers and boss want us to be there. And if there's an unfortunate decision that someone needs to leave the organization, they're less likely to let someone go who's joyful.
Yeah,
in my experience.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm not always that serious. And I know that takes people off guard, especially in interviewing. I laugh a lot. I laugh, at trauma. I think when people have been through a lot of trauma, we can have this laughter about it. And it's not really, it's healing. It's like releasing in some way. So I think that there's something about the flow of life keeps flowing through you when you're joyful. You're just bringing in more light and sending out more light. So I agree. Well, thank you for talking with me, and I will put all your links below, but you just tell me what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and to find you out there.
Sure. Well, the website is intuitiveleadershipmastery.com. You can either type that in, or if you Google for it, I'm sure I'm very close to the top of the search results. My book you can find on Amazon, or you can find it through my website. I also have a podcast on the website. So those are all great ways to find me, and love to hear from anyone listening, and any feedback you have on the things I've shared today or anything in my book that appeals to you.
Fascinating. Well, thank you so much and enjoy your day out there in Peru. I know you'll spread light and joy.
Thank you so much, Tricia.